On Christmas morning 1997, 3 aspiring models checked out of the Mirage Hotel in Las Vegas, their suitcases packed, their futures gleaming before them like the neon lights of the Strip. They climbed into a rental car headed for Los Angeles, where a photo shoot and new contracts awaited. They never arrived. For 26 years, their families clung to hope while investigators chased shadows through the desert. But in December 2023, a construction crew breaking ground on a new resort 40 miles outside Vegas unearthed something that would shatter the mystery wide open and reveal a darkness far more twisted than anyone had imagined. If stories of long-buried secrets and the relentless pursuit of truth grip you, stay with us until the end. The desert outside Las Vegas keeps its secrets well. Beneath the scrub brush and sun-bleached rock, the earth holds memories that time tries to erase. Rachel Morrow had learned this truth in the hardest way possible, spending 26 Christmases wondering where her sister had gone, each year dimming the hope that burned so bright in the beginning. Now, standing in the lobby of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, on a cold December morning in 2023, Rachel held her phone with trembling hands. The detective's voice on the line had been careful, measured, the tone of someone delivering news that would change everything. "We need you to come in, Ms. Morrow. We've found something." Through the glass doors, Rachel could see the city waking up, the morning sun painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold. Somewhere out in that vast desert, her sister Jennifer had been waiting all these years. Rachel had never stopped searching, never stopped asking questions, never stopped believing that someday the truth would surface. As she approached the reception desk, her reflection caught in the polished surface beside the elevator. At 48, she looked older than her years, the weight of decades spent searching etched into every line of her face. But today, something had changed. Today, the ground had given up its dead, and with them, the beginning of answers. The detective who met her on the 3rd floor had kind eyes, but they carried the weariness of someone who had seen too much darkness. He led her to a conference room where another woman and a middle-aged man already sat, their faces pale with the same mixture of dread and desperate hope that Rachel felt churning in her stomach. "Thank you all for coming," Detective Marcus Cole said, closing the door behind them. "I know this has been an impossibly long wait." Rachel recognized the other woman immediately, though they had never met in person. Diana Chen, sister of Lily Chen. And the man must be Robert Hastings, brother of Kimberly Hastings. For 26 years, they had been connected by absence, by the 3 young women who had vanished together on Christmas Day, 1997. "Construction workers found remains yesterday," Detective Cole said, quietly. "At a site 40 miles east of the city. We've positively identified 3 individuals through dental records and DNA." He paused, his expression heavy with the burden of what he was about to say. "Jennifer Morrow, Lily Chen, and Kimberly Hastings. I'm so very sorry." The room seemed to tilt. Rachel gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. She had known, somewhere deep inside, that Jennifer was gone. But knowing and hearing it confirmed were entirely different things. Beside her, Diana Chen made a small, broken sound, while Robert Hastings simply stared at the detective with empty eyes. "How?" Rachel heard herself ask, her voice strange and distant. "How did they die?" Detective Cole's jaw tightened. "That's why we needed you here today. What we found at that site, it's not just your loved ones. There's evidence of something much larger, something that's been hidden for a very long time." He opened a folder on the table, but didn't remove its contents yet. "I need to prepare you. What we're about to discuss is going to be difficult, but I promise you, we won't stop until we have all the answers." Rachel looked at the faces of the others in the room, seeing her own pain reflected back at her. They had waited so long for this moment, for any moment that would bring their loved ones home. Now it had arrived, and with it came the terrible certainty that the truth would be darker than any of them had imagined. "Tell us everything," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. We've waited 26 years. We deserve to know. The photographs spread across the conference table showed 3 young women in their early 20s, their smiles bright with the kind of confidence that comes from believing the world is full of possibilities. Jennifer Morrow, 23, had auburn hair that fell past her shoulders and green eyes that sparkled with ambition. Lily Chen, 22, possessed delicate features and a serene expression that made her seem older than her years. Kimberly Hastings, 24, had blonde hair and a wide, infectious smile that the camera loved. Detective Cole placed the photos carefully in front of the families. Let's start with what we knew then, and what we've learned since. Rachel stared at her sister's face, remembering the last time they had spoken. It had been late on Christmas Eve, 1997. Jennifer had called from the Mirage, breathless with excitement about the photo shoot waiting in Los Angeles. A major agency had noticed their portfolio from a Vegas convention. This was their big break, the moment all 3 women had been working toward. They checked out of the Mirage at 9:42 on Christmas morning, Detective Cole said, consulting his notes. Surveillance footage showed them loading their luggage into a silver Toyota Camry, a rental. The vehicle was registered to Lily Chen. They were dressed casually, jeans and sweaters, ready for the drive. Jennifer was carrying a road map. Kimberly had a large coffee. Everything appeared normal. The rental car was never found, Robert Hastings said, his voice rough. I remember that from the original investigation. Detective Cole nodded. Correct. The car vanished along with them. The route from Vegas to Los Angeles is straightforward, mostly Interstate 15 through the desert. But we checked every mile of that highway, every rest stop, every gas station. No one reported seeing them. No transactions on their credit cards after they left the hotel. It was as if they simply evaporated. Rachel remembered those early days of the investigation, the way hope had slowly curdled into desperation. The police had initially suggested the women might have decided to run away, to start new lives somewhere else. But anyone who knew them understood how absurd that was. Jennifer had been planning to visit their parents in Phoenix on New Year's. Lily was engaged to be married in the spring. Kimberly had a callback audition for a commercial in January. None of them had any reason to disappear. There was one witness, Diana Chen said quietly. She had barely spoken since the detective confirmed the identities. Someone at a gas station near the Nevada-California border. They thought they saw the car. Yes, Detective Cole acknowledged. A clerk at a Chevron station reported seeing a silver Camry with 3 young women around noon on December 25th. But the description was vague, and there were hundreds of silver Camrys traveling that route during the holidays. We could never confirm it was them. He pulled out another set of documents. What the original investigators didn't have was what we have now. Technology has advanced significantly, and more importantly, we have the site where they were found. Detective Cole activated a laptop, and an overhead image appeared on the screen mounted to the wall. It showed barren desert, marked with survey lines and excavation equipment. This is 40 miles east of Las Vegas, well off any main roads. The land was purchased 6 months ago by Meridian Entertainment Group for a new resort development. When the construction crew began clearing and excavating, they found something unexpected. He clicked to the next image, and Rachel's breath caught. The photograph showed a partially excavated area, and even without detailed explanation, the organized nature of the site was clear. This wasn't a random burial. This was deliberate. We found 3 graves, Detective Cole said quietly. Your sisters, your loved ones. But that's not all we found. He paused, his expression grave. There were 7 other sets of remains, all young women, all buried in the same methodical pattern. The words hung in the air like smoke. Rachel felt the room spinning around her. 7 others, 10 women in total, buried in the desert for decades. Some of the remains are older than your family members, the detective continued. Preliminary analysis suggests the earliest burial dates back to the mid-1980s. The most recent appears to be from the late 1990s. We're working on identification, but it's going to take time. Who did this? Robert Hastings asked, his voice breaking. Who killed them? Detective Cole's jaw tightened. That's what we need to find out. And that's why I need your help. I need you to walk me through everything you remember about the days leading up to their disappearance. Every detail, no matter how small. Because whoever did this didn't just kill your loved ones, they killed at least 7 other women, and they got away with it for decades. Until now. Rachel reached across the table and took Diana's hand. The other woman's fingers were ice cold, trembling. They sat in silence for a moment, 3 people bound together by loss, now faced with the impossible task of helping to unravel a horror that had been hidden beneath the desert sand for 26 years. Where do you want us to start? Rachel asked finally. Detective Cole opened his folder fully, revealing a timeline marked with dates, locations, and photographs. Let's start with how they met. And then I want to know about everyone they encountered in Las Vegas. Every photographer, every agent, every person who might have crossed their paths. Because somewhere in those days before Christmas 1997, your loved ones met their killer. The conference room had grown colder as the afternoon wore on. Or perhaps it was just the chill of the story they were piecing together. Rachel wrapped her hands around a paper cup of coffee that had long since gone lukewarm, staring at the timeline Detective Cole had constructed on the whiteboard. Jennifer, Lily, and Kimberly had met at a modeling workshop in San Diego 18 months before they disappeared. The workshop had been one of those weekend events promising to connect aspiring models with industry professionals, the kind advertised in the back of fashion magazines. Most were scams or dead ends, but this one had been different. The 3 women had bonded immediately, discovering they shared not just ambition but a genuine friendship. They stayed in touch after San Diego, Rachel said, pulling out her phone to show Detective Cole screenshots of old emails she had saved, her sister's words preserved in digital amber. Jennifer was living in Phoenix, working at a department store and doing local catalog work. Lily was in Sacramento, and Kimberly was in Portland. They would share job leads, give each other advice. They were really supportive of one another. Diana Chen nodded. Lily talked about them all the time. She said they were like sisters. In October 1997, they all got invitations to a modeling convention in Las Vegas, Rachel continued. The Paradise Modeling Expo. It was supposed to be 3 days of workshops, portfolio reviews, meetings with agents. Jennifer was so excited. She used all her savings to pay for the hotel and the convention fee. Detective Cole made notes on his laptop. The Paradise Modeling Expo. We're going to need to pull records from that event. Do any of you remember the name of the company that organized it? Stellar Talent Agency, Robert Hastings said. Kimberly mentioned it in her letters. She said it seemed legitimate, that there were real photographers and agents there. But that's not where they met whoever took them, Rachel said, her voice tight. It was after the convention ended. They decided to stay in Vegas for a few extra days, through Christmas. They were celebrating because a photographer at the convention had been impressed with their work. He said he could get them a photo shoot in Los Angeles, something with a major agency. Detective Cole leaned forward. Do you remember the photographer's name? Rachel closed her eyes, trying to recall the details from her last conversation with Jennifer. It had been late on Christmas Eve. Jennifer had been in the hotel room, her voice bubbling with excitement. She had mentioned a name. Rachel was certain of it. Marcus something? She said finally. Or maybe it was Michael. Jennifer said he had done work for major magazines, that he had connections in Los Angeles. He gave them his card, told them to meet him at his studio the day after Christmas. But they never made it to the studio, Diana said softly. They disappeared on the drive. Detective Cole's expression darkened. Or that's what we were meant to think. He pulled out another document, this one a map with several locations marked. The original investigation assumed they vanished somewhere along the highway. But what if they never left Vegas? What if this photographer, whoever he was, intercepted them before they could get out of the city? Rachel felt something cold settle in her stomach. You think he killed them here? In Las Vegas? I think it's possible, the detective said carefully. The burial site is 40 miles east of the city. remote, but accessible from Vegas with the right vehicle. If someone knew the area well, if they had been using that location for years, it would explain why we never found any trace of them along the highway. He brought up a new image on the screen, an aerial view of Las Vegas in 1997. The city had been smaller then, the sprawl not yet reaching into the eastern desert. This area where they were found, it was even more isolated back then. No development, no traffic. The perfect place to hide something you never wanted found. Robert Hastings stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His reflection in the glass looked haunted. So this photographer, if we can find out who he was, if we can track him down after all these years, then we might have our killer, Detective Cole finished. But here's the problem. The Paradise Modeling Expo Company, stellar talent agency, it dissolved in 1998. The records are scattered, if they exist at all. And even if we can reconstruct the list of photographers who attended that convention, we're looking for someone who might have been using a false name, false credentials. Someone who specifically targeted these women. Rachel's mind raced through the possibilities. Jennifer had been so careful, so smart. She wouldn't have gone off with just anyone. This photographer must have seemed legitimate, professional. He must have known exactly how to gain their trust. There was a business card, she said suddenly, the memory surfacing like a stone thrown into still water. Jennifer mentioned he gave them a business card with his studio address in Los Angeles. She said it looked expensive, professional. She was going to call ahead to confirm the appointment. Detective Cole's eyes sharpened. Did she tell you what was on the card? A name, an address, anything? Rachel shook her head, frustration building. The detail was there, somewhere in that last conversation, but she couldn't quite grasp it. She had been distracted that night, wrapping presents for her parents, only half listening to her sister's excitement. How could she have known it would be the last time they would ever speak? I might have something, Diana Chen said quietly. She was looking at her phone, scrolling through old messages. Lily sent me a text on December 24th. She was excited about the photo shoot. She said the photographer's studio was in West Hollywood, near Sunset Boulevard. She thought it was a good sign, that only established photographers could afford that area. Detective Cole immediately began typing. That's helpful. We can pull property records for photo studios in West Hollywood from that period. It'll take time, but it's a lead. What about the other women? Robert asked, turning from the window. The 7 other sets of remains you found. Do we know anything about them? The detective's expression grew even more grave. We're working on identification now. Some of them have been there for decades, which makes it harder. But based on the burial pattern, the way the graves were arranged, we believe all of them were killed by the same person. And we believe all of them were young women, probably in their 20s or early 30s. He pulled up another image. This one a diagram of the burial site. The graves had been arranged in 2 rows, carefully spaced, each marked with a small pile of stones. The methodical nature of it was chilling, the work of someone who had taken pride in his organization, who had returned to this place again and again over the years. This wasn't random violence, Detective Cole said. This was a predator who hunted specific victims, someone who had access to young women, who knew how to gain their trust, and someone who knew this desert well enough to use it as his personal graveyard. Rachel stared at the diagram. Her sister's grave marked with a small red flag in the photograph. 26 years, Jennifer had been out there. 26 years while Rachel searched and hoped and refused to give up. And all that time, her sister had been lying in the desert, one of 10 victims of a killer who had walked away clean. We're going to find him, Detective Cole said, his voice hard with determination. We have forensic evidence from the site, DNA from beneath the victim's fingernails, fiber evidence, trace materials. We have technology now that didn't exist in 1997. And we have you, the people who knew them best, who can help us reconstruct their final days. Rachel looked at Diana and Robert, seeing her own resolve reflected in their faces. They had lived with this absence for so long, had learned to carry the weight of not knowing. Now they knew. And the knowing was terrible, but it was also a kind of relief. because now they could fight back. Now they could help bring their loved ones home, and more importantly, help bring their killer to justice. "Tell us what you need," Rachel said. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we're with you until the end." The days following the initial meeting blurred together in a haze of interviews, document reviews, and painful recollections. Rachel found herself staying in a budget hotel near the police station, unable to return home to Phoenix, while so many questions remained unanswered. Diana Chen had made the same decision, and the two women found themselves meeting for coffee each morning before heading to the precinct, their shared grief creating a bond that felt both necessary and fragile. Detective Cole's team had expanded the investigation significantly. A conference room on the third floor had been converted into a command center, its walls covered with photographs, timelines, and maps. The faces of 10 young women stared out from the evidence board, including 3 that Rachel now knew by heart. But the other 7 remained nameless, their identities lost to time and the desert sand. "We've made progress on the photographer angle," Detective Cole said on the 4th day, gathering Rachel, Diana, and Robert around the main table. He had dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he had been working through the nights. "We pulled business licenses and property records for photo studios in West Hollywood during 1997. There were 43 registered studios in the area Lily mentioned." Rachel felt a flicker of hope. "Can you track down the owners?" "We're working on it. But here's where it gets complicated. About half of those studios changed ownership or closed within a few years, and several were operating under corporate names that make it difficult to identify the actual photographers working there." He spread out a list of names and addresses. "What we need is something that connects one of these studios to your sisters. A phone number they might have written down, a name that sounds familiar, anything." Diana leaned over the list, her finger trailing down the entries. Lily was organized. She kept appointment books, wrote everything down. "After she disappeared, I went through all her things. I still have boxes of her stuff in storage, back in Sacramento." "Could you have it shipped here?" Detective Cole asked. "Or better yet, could someone go through it and photograph anything that might be relevant?" "I can go," Diana said immediately. "I can drive back today, go through everything, and be back by tomorrow night." Robert cleared his throat. Kimberly had a roommate in Portland. They shared an apartment. "I should call her, see if Kim left anything behind that might help." Detective Cole nodded, making notes. "Good. Any physical evidence from that time period could be crucial. Appointment books, business cards, even receipts from Vegas. We need to reconstruct their movements during those days before Christmas." Rachel thought about her own search through Jennifer's belongings, done in those desperate early weeks after the disappearance. She had gone through every drawer, every box, looking for some clue about where her sister might have gone. But Jennifer had taken her important documents with her, her portfolio and appointment book packed in her suitcase for the trip to Los Angeles. Everything that might have helped was gone. "There's something else," Detective Cole said, his tone shifting to something more grave. "The forensic team has completed their analysis of the burial site. What they found is going to be difficult to hear, but I think you need to know." Rachel braced herself, gripping the edge of the table. Beside her, Diana had gone very still. "The graves were dug with care," the detective continued quietly. "Each one approximately 6 feet deep, the bodies positioned uniformly. Our forensic anthropologist believes the killer spent significant time at the site with each victim. There were traces of concrete mix in several of the graves, suggesting he may have marked them somehow above ground, though any surface markers have long since eroded away." "Marked them how?" Robert asked, his voice strained. "We're not entirely sure, but the pattern suggests he viewed this as more than just a disposal site. There's evidence he returned to the location multiple times over the years, even after the graves were filled. We found tire tracks preserved in a dried arroyo nearby, multiple sets from different time periods. And we found something else." He pulled out a photograph showing a small metal object partially excavated from the sand. "This was buried near the center of the site. It's a lockbox, weathered but intact." Rachel leaned closer to study the image. The box was approximately the size of a shoebox, its metal surface corroded by years underground, but still recognizably manufactured. What was inside? We haven't opened it yet. We're processing it for prints and DNA first, but X-ray imaging shows it contains multiple items, papers, possibly photographs, and what appears to be jewelry or small personal effects. Detective Cole's expression was hard. We believe this is the killer's trophy collection, things he took from his victims. The room fell silent. Rachel felt sick, imagining someone taking pieces of Jennifer, keeping them like souvenirs. The violation of it, the casual cruelty, made her want to scream. "When will you open it?" Diana asked, her voice barely audible. "Tomorrow morning. We're documenting everything carefully. Once we've processed the exterior, we'll open it in a controlled environment and catalog the contents." He looked at each of them in turn. "I want to offer you the option to be present when we do. It's not standard procedure, but given the circumstances, I think you have a right to see what's inside. However, I need to warn you that it may be deeply disturbing." Rachel didn't hesitate. "I want to be there." Diana and Robert both nodded their agreement. They had come this far, learned this much. There was no turning back now, no matter how dark the truth became. Detective Cole seemed to expect this response. "All right, 9 a.m. tomorrow in the forensics lab. I'll have one of my officers escort you." He gathered up his papers, then paused. "There's one more thing. We've been reviewing missing persons reports from Nevada and surrounding states, trying to identify the other 7 victims. We found several cases that match the general profile. Young women, early 20s to early 30s, who disappeared in or around Las Vegas between 1985 and 1998. He pulled out a new set of photographs, faces that had been reproduced from old missing persons flyers and family snapshots. Some of these women were tourists, others worked in the city, a cocktail waitress, a blackjack dealer, a dancer. But several of them had something in common with your sisters. They were aspiring models or actresses, women who came to Vegas looking for opportunities in entertainment. Rachel studied the faces, each one a life cut short. A family left behind with questions that had never been answered. He had a type. He was hunting them. That's our theory. Someone who had access to young women in the entertainment industry, who could pose as a photographer or agent. Someone who knew how to make them trust him, how to get them alone. Detective Cole's jaw tightened. And someone who knew that desert intimately. That burial site required local knowledge, familiarity with the area. This wasn't someone passing through. This was someone who lived here, who had time and privacy to do what he did. "Could he still be in Las Vegas?" Robert asked. "It's possible. Or he could have left years ago. The most recent burial dates to the late 1990s, around the same time your sisters disappeared. After that, as far as we can tell, the killing stopped. Either he died, moved away, or was incarcerated for something else." The detective's expression darkened. "Or he found a new burial site, and we just haven't discovered it yet." The thought was chilling. Rachel forced herself to focus on what they could control, what they could do now. "What about the modeling convention? Have you been able to track down anyone who worked for Stellar Talent Agency?" "We've located 3 people who were employed by the company in 1997. 2 are willing to talk to us. We have interviews scheduled for next week. We're hoping they can provide a list of the photographers and agents who participated in the Paradise Modeling Expo that year." It was progress, Rachel told herself. Slow, painful progress, but forward movement nonetheless. They were building a picture of those final days, identifying the places where Jennifer and the others had crossed paths with their killer. Somewhere in the timeline, somewhere in the list of names and faces, the truth was waiting to be found. The forensics laboratory occupied the basement level of the police building, a space that felt deliberately isolated from the world above. Rachel arrived 15 minutes early, unable to sleep, unable to eat the breakfast she had attempted at the hotel. Diana met her in the hallway, her face pale but composed, and together they waited for Robert Hastings, who appeared a few moments later looking as though he had aged years in the past week. Detective Cole emerged from the lab at exactly 9 o'clock, dressed in protective gear. "We're ready. I need you to understand that we're treating this as active evidence in an ongoing investigation. You can observe, but you cannot touch anything. And if at any point this becomes too much, you can leave. No one will judge you." They followed him through a security door into a large room filled with examination tables and equipment Rachel couldn't begin to identify. The metal lockbox sat on a central table under bright lights, surrounded by cameras positioned to document every angle. 2 forensic technicians stood nearby, also in protective gear, their expressions professionally neutral. "We've already processed the exterior," one of the technicians explained. "A woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. We found no usable fingerprints. The metal was too degraded, but we did find trace DNA on the handle, which we're running through CODIS. The lock itself is corroded, so we're going to have to cut it open." Rachel watched as the technician picked up a specialized cutting tool and carefully applied it to the lock mechanism. The sound of metal grinding against metal filled the space, setting her teeth on edge. After several minutes, there was a click, and the lock separated from the box. The technician set down the tool and carefully lifted the lid. Inside, preserved by the sealed metal container, was a collection of items that made Rachel's breath catch in her throat. Photographs, at least 24 of them, arranged in neat stacks. A tangle of jewelry, necklaces and earrings and bracelets that glinted under the laboratory lights. And underneath everything, a leather-bound journal, its pages warped by time but still intact. "We'll document each item individually," Detective Cole said quietly. "Then we'll see if any of you can identify pieces that belong to your loved ones." The technicians worked with painstaking care, removing each photograph and placing it on an adjacent examination table. Rachel felt Diana's hand find hers as the first images became visible. They were modeling shots, professional quality, showing young women posing against various backgrounds. Beach scenes, urban settings, studio portraits with soft lighting. The women were beautiful, confident, each one captured in a moment of hope and possibility. Rachel recognized her sister in the 7th photograph. Jennifer standing against a backdrop of desert landscape, wearing the denim jacket she had bought specifically for her portfolio. Her auburn hair caught the sunlight, her smile radiant. It was a picture Rachel had seen before, one from Jennifer's portfolio collection. "That's her," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. "That's Jennifer." The technician made a note, marking the photograph with an evidence number. They continued through the stack, and Diana made a small, pained sound when Lily's face appeared. 3 photographs later, Kimberly smiled out at them from beside a vintage car. But there were other faces too. Women Rachel didn't recognize. The earlier victims, she realized. The ones still waiting to be identified. Each photograph was professional quality, suggesting they had been taken during legitimate modeling sessions before something went terribly wrong. "These aren't crime scene photos," Detective Cole observed, studying the images carefully. "These are from actual photo shoots." He was keeping mementos of his victims as they were before, not after. The technicians moved on to the jewelry, spreading it across a white examination cloth. Rachel spotted Jennifer's necklace immediately, a simple silver chain with a small turquoise pendant that their grandmother had given her. Diana identified Lily's bracelet, a delicate gold piece with Chinese characters that meant courage. Robert, his voice choked, pointed out Kimberly's earrings, tiny silver stars she had worn every day. "This confirms he took trophies," Detective Cole said grimly, "items he could keep to remember them by." But it was the journal that drew everyone's attention. The technician lifted it carefully from the bottom of the box and placed it on a clean examination surface. The leather cover was dark brown, embossed with initials that time had partially obscured. The technician opened it slowly, revealing pages filled with neat handwriting. Rachel leaned closer, trying to make out the words. The entries were dated, starting in 1984 and continuing through 1998. Each entry was brief, clinical, documenting dates and locations with the detached precision of someone keeping business records. "It's a log," one of the technicians said, her voice tight with disgust. He was keeping track of his victims. Detective Cole pulled on gloves and carefully turned the pages, reading through entries that documented 15 years of murder. His expression grew darker with each page. When he reached the final entries, dated December 1997, Rachel saw her sister's name written in that same neat hand. Jennifer Morrow, Lily Chen, Kimberly Hastings, December 25, 1997. Paradise Cases. Studio session completed. Transport at 0600. Site 7. Graves 8 through 10. The casual notation of her sister's death, reduced to a few sentences in a killer's journal, made Rachel feel as though the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. Diana had turned away, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Robert stood frozen, staring at the journal with an expression of absolute horror. Paradise Cases, Detective Cole repeated, his voice hard. That's a direct reference to the Paradise Modeling Expo. He was selecting his victims from the convention. He turned more pages, finding similar entries dating back over the years. Each one documented a woman's disappearance with the same clinical detachment. Some entries included additional notes that suggested planning, preparation, careful stalking of his intended victims before he made his move. "There's a signature," the technician said, pointing to the inside cover of the journal. The initials had been pressed into the leather, partially worn but still visible. ML. ML, Detective Cole said thoughtfully. Marcus or Michael with an L last name. That matches what Rachel remembered about the photographer who approached them at the convention. He carefully turned to the first entry in the journal, dated October 1984. The entry was longer than the others, almost reflective. First acquisition. Learned much. Location secure. Will continue as opportunity presents. He called them acquisitions, Diana said, her voice hollow. Like they were objects, like they were his collection. That's exactly what they were to him, Detective Cole said grimly. And this journal documents every acquisition over 15 years, which means we now have dates, locations, and references that should help us identify the other victims and potentially track down the killer. He looked up at Rachel and the others, his expression a mixture of determination and something that might have been respect. "This changes everything. This journal is going to break this case wide open. We're going to identify every single woman he took, and we're going to find him." Rachel stared down at the photograph of her sister, at the jewelry that Jennifer had worn, at the page in the journal that reduced her murder to a few cold sentences. The horror of it was overwhelming, but beneath the horror was something else. A burning certainty that they were finally close to answers, finally close to justice. "What do we do now?" she asked. Detective Cole carefully closed the journal. "Now we use what we've found. We cross-reference these dates with missing persons reports. We track down everyone who worked for Stellar Talent Agency. We find out who ML is and where he is now, and we make him answer for every single life he took." The investigation accelerated with the discovery of the journal. Detective Cole assembled a dedicated task force, pulling in specialists from various departments to analyze every aspect of the evidence. The journal entries were photographed, transcribed, and cross-referenced with missing persons databases from across the western United States. Within 48 hours, they had tentatively identified 3 more victims from the burial site. Women whose disappearances matched the dates and locations mentioned in ML's meticulous record-keeping. Rachel spent her days at the precinct, combing through old convention records that had been salvaged from storage units and defunct businesses. The Paradise Modeling Expo had been one of dozens of similar events held in Las Vegas during the 1990s, part of an industry that promised dreams but often delivered disappointment. Most of the companies involved had dissolved years ago, their records scattered or destroyed. But Detective Cole's team was persistent, tracking down former employees, locating archived documents, slowly reconstructing the list of photographers and agents who had attended the December 1997 convention. On the 6th day, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A woman named Patricia Novak, who had worked as a registration coordinator for Stellar Talent Agency, contacted the police after seeing news reports about the discovered remains. She had kept her own records from the conventions, she explained, including business card copies and contact sheets from every photographer who had paid for booth space at the Paradise Expo. Rachel was present when Patricia arrived at the precinct, a woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She carried a large plastic storage container filled with binders and file folders, materials she had preserved for over 2 decades. "I always thought something was wrong about that event," Patricia said as she set the container on the conference table. "After those girls disappeared, after the news coverage, I kept thinking about all the men who had been there, all the photographers who had shown such interest in the models. But the police at the time didn't seem to care about the convention. They thought the girls had vanished on the highway." Detective Cole opened the first binder, revealing page after page of business cards, each one carefully mounted and labeled with dates and booth numbers. "This is incredibly helpful, Ms. Novak. Why did you keep such detailed records?" Patricia's expression tightened. "Because I had seen questionable behavior at these events. Photographers who were too aggressive, who made the young women uncomfortable. I wanted to keep track of who was who, in case there were ever complaints or problems. I reported some concerns to my supervisor, but the agency cared more about vendor fees than about protecting the models." She began pulling out specific pages, organizing them chronologically. The Paradise Expo in December 1997 had 63 photographers registered. Most were legitimate professionals, but there were always a few who raised red flags. Men who seemed more interested in getting the models alone than in actually building portfolios. Rachel leaned over the binders, studying the business cards. They represented a cross-section of the industry, from established studios to freelancers working out of spare bedrooms. Some cards were professionally printed on heavy stock, others were simple photocopies with handwritten phone numbers. Each one represented a potential suspect, a man who had been in the right place at the right time to encounter Jennifer, Lily, and Kimberly. "Do you remember anyone with the initials ML?" Detective Cole asked. "Someone who might have operated a studio in West Hollywood." Patricia frowned, thinking. She began flipping through the pages more deliberately, her finger trailing down the entries. There were several M names. Let me see. Martin Lawrence, but he was from San Francisco. Mitchell Crane, he was local to Vegas. And then there was... She stopped, her finger hovering over a business card. Marcus Lang. He had a studio in Los Angeles. Rachel felt her heart rate spike. Marcus Lang, ML. The business card was elegant, printed on cream-colored stock with embossed lettering. Lang Photography Studio, it read. Fine Art and Commercial Photography, West Hollywood, California. Below the text was an address on Sunset Boulevard and a phone number with a 213 area code. "Do you remember him?" Detective Cole asked, his voice carefully controlled. Patricia nodded slowly. "Yes, actually. He stood out because he was very professional, very polished. He had a large portfolio display at his booth, showed work that had supposedly been published in magazines. The models were drawn to him because his work looked legitimate. He wasn't pushy like some of the others. He was patient, charming even. He would talk to the women about their career goals, make them feel seen and valued." "Did he talk to Jennifer Morrow, Lily Chen, or Kimberly Hastings?" Rachel asked, unable to keep the urgency from her voice. "I don't know the specific names. I processed hundreds of models that weekend. But I remember he was there all 3 days, and his booth was consistently busy. Young women waiting in line to have him review their portfolios." Patricia's expression clouded. "After the disappearances were reported, I thought about mentioning him to the police, but I had no real reason to suspect him specifically. He had seemed so professional, so legitimate, and the police were focused on the highway, not the convention." Detective Cole was already on his phone, calling through to the research team. "I need everything you can find on Marcus Lang and Lang Photography Studio in West Hollywood. Property records, business licenses, tax filings, anything from 1995 to 2000. Priority 1. He turned back to Patricia. Did Lang have any assistance with him at the convention? Anyone who helped manage his booth? I think so, but I don't remember details. You might check with the other vendors who were there. Some of them are still in business. She pulled out another folder. I have a vendor directory from that year. It lists everyone who rented booth space, along with contact information that was current at the time. The next hours were a blur of activity. The task force began tracking down former vendors and convention attendees, searching for anyone who remembered Marcus Lang or could provide information about his activities in December 1997. The research team worked to locate property records for the studio address on Sunset Boulevard. By evening, they had assembled a preliminary profile. Lang Photography Studio had been established in 1983 and operated continuously through 1999, when it abruptly closed. The property had been leased, not owned, and when the business dissolved, Marcus Lang had seemingly vanished. No forwarding address, no tax returns filed after 1998, no credit card activity or bank records. He had disappeared as thoroughly as his victims. He knew we'd eventually connect him to the missing women, Detective Cole said, studying the timeline they had constructed. The Paradise Expo in December 1997 was his last known appearance. After that, he closed the studio and vanished. The question is whether he's alive and hiding, or whether something else happened to him. Rachel stared at the photograph they had finally located, a grainy image from a 1995 photography magazine article about up-and-coming commercial photographers. Marcus Lang looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, with dark hair starting to gray at the temples, sharp features, and eyes that seemed to assess the camera with calculation. He wore an expensive suit and stood in what was presumably his studio, surrounded by photography equipment and framed prints. This was the man who had killed her sister, who had smiled and charmed Jennifer, made her feel special and talented, and then taken everything from her. Rachel felt rage building inside her, hot and consuming. "We need to find him," she said, her voice hard. "He's out there somewhere, and he needs to pay for what he did." Detective Cole nodded. "We're going to find him. We have his real name now, his face, his background. We can trace his movements, find out where he went when he closed the studio. Someone knows where Marcus Lang is, and we're going to find them." Diana Chen spoke up from across the table, her voice quiet but steady. "What if he's dead? What if he died years ago and that's why the killing stopped?" It was a possibility they all had to consider. 25 years had passed since Marcus Lang disappeared. He could have died from natural causes, been killed in an accident, or even been murdered himself. The trail could end at a grave somewhere, justice forever out of reach. "Then we prove it," Detective Cole said. "We track him as far as we can go, and if he's dead, we document it. But until we have a body or a death certificate, we assume he's alive. We assume he's out there, and we keep looking." Rachel looked at the photograph of Marcus Lang again, committing every detail to memory. This face had been the last thing Jennifer saw. These hands had taken her life. And somewhere, whether alive or dead, Marcus Lang held the final answers to questions that had haunted Rachel for 26 years. "There's one more thing," Patricia Novak said, hesitant. "I don't know if it's relevant, but I remember Langa mentioned he had a ranch property somewhere outside Las Vegas. He said he used it for outdoor photo shoots, desert landscapes and such. He even invited some of the models to come out for a session, said he could create a whole Western-themed portfolio for them." Detective Cole's attention sharpened. "A ranch? Did he say where?" "East of the city, I think. Somewhere out in the empty areas." Patricia's eyes widened as the implication became clear. "Oh God, you don't think—" "The burial site is 40 miles east of Las Vegas," Detective Cole said grimly, "on property that was undeveloped until 6 months ago. If Lang owned land out there, if that's where he took his victims, he was already reaching for his phone again. I need property records for all land parcels east of Las Vegas registered to Marcus Lang or Langa Photography between 1980 and 2000. Check corporate names, shell companies, anything connected to him." Rachel felt pieces clicking into place. The ranch property would have given Lang privacy, isolation, the perfect location to commit murder and dispose of bodies. The photographs in his trophy box had included desert backgrounds. He had been using the ranch for photo shoots, legitimate sessions with models who walked away alive. But some shoots had ended differently. Some models never came home. He was taking them to the ranch, Rachel said, the horror of it settling over her like a shroud. He would schedule a photo shoot, drive them out into the desert where no one could hear them scream, and then he'd kill them and bury them right there on his own property. It was the perfect trap. Detective Cole's jaw tightened. If we can prove he owned that land, if we can connect him directly to the burial site, it's game over. We'll have enough for an arrest warrant that will last forever. No statute of limitations on murder. Wherever Marcus Lang is hiding, he's running out of time. The property records came through at 3 in the morning. Detective Cole called Rachel at her hotel, his voice urgent despite the late hour. A 40-acre parcel of land, purchased in 1982 under the name of Lang Holdings LLC, sat exactly 41.3 miles east of central Las Vegas. The property had been sold in 1999 to a development company for a fraction of its potential value, part of what appeared to be a rushed liquidation of assets. The development company had left the land, undeveloped, eventually selling it to another company, which sold it to another, until it finally ended up in the hands of Meridian Entertainment Group 6 months ago. Rachel dressed quickly and arrived at the precinct before 4, finding the task force already assembled. Maps of the property were spread across the conference table, satellite images from different decades showing the gradual changes in the surrounding landscape. In the 1980s and 1990s, the area had been completely isolated, accessible only by dirt roads that weren't marked on any official maps. The burial site sits right in the center of what was Lang's property, Detective Cole explained, pointing to the overlay of old property lines on current satellite imagery. There was a structure here. See these foundation remnants? Our team investigated yesterday afternoon. It was a small building, probably a cabin or studio space. It burned down sometime in the late 1990s, but we found evidence it was deliberately set. Accelerant traces in the soil. He destroyed the evidence, Robert Hastings said, his voice hollow. He had driven back from Portland 2 days ago and looked as exhausted as Rachel felt. Before he disappeared, he burned down whatever building was there and tried to erase any trace of what he'd done. Almost succeeded too, Detective Cole agreed. If it weren't for modern development reaching this area, the graves might never have been found. He chose his burial site well. Remote, arid climate that slows decomposition, minimal water flow that might disturb the graves. He understood the desert. Diana Chen was studying a photograph taken at the site, showing the partially excavated foundation of the burned structure. Was there anything inside? Anything that survived the fire? Our forensics team is still processing what they found. Mostly it's ash and melted materials. But there was a basement or cellar beneath the structure, and that's where things get interesting. Detective Cole pulled up new images on his laptop. The underground space was partially protected from the fire. We found photographer's equipment down there. Light stands, reflectors, backdrop poles, and we found something else. The image showed a wall of the underground space, concrete blocks darkened by smoke but still intact. On the wall, someone had painted a series of tally marks in neat rows. Rachel counted them quickly. 23 marks in total. 23, she said, her voice barely audible. Are those? Victims, we believe. He was keeping count. Detective Cole's expression was grim. We found 10 sets of remains at this site. We're organizing a more extensive search of the surrounding property, but the desert is vast and he had 40 acres to work with. There could be more graves we haven't located yet. The number was staggering. 23 women potentially, all taken by Marcus Lang over a period of years. All buried somewhere in the desert, reduced to tally marks on a basement wall. How do we find him? Rachel asked. It was the question that had consumed her for days. The need to see Marcus Lang face justice for what he had done. It's been 25 years since he disappeared. He could be anywhere. We're pursuing several leads. Detective Cole said. First, we've entered his information into national databases. If he's using his real name anywhere, if he has a driver's license or pays taxes or owns property, we'll find him. Second, we're looking at his known associates from before 1999. Family members, friends, business partners. Someone might know where he went. He pulled up a new document on the screen. We've located Lange's ex-wife, a woman named Catherine Lang, now Catherine Morrison. She divorced him in 1996, citing irreconcilable differences. She's living in Oregon now, remarried with a different life. We've reached out to her and she's agreed to meet with us. When? Rachel asked immediately. Tomorrow. She's driving down to Las Vegas to talk to us in person. She said she has things she needs to say about Marcus, things she should have said years ago. Detective Cole paused. She sounded scared on the phone. Whatever she knows about her ex-husband, it's been weighing on her for a long time. The meeting with Catherine Morrison was scheduled for 2 o'clock the following afternoon. Rachel spent the morning restless and anxious, unable to focus on anything except the coming interview. Diana joined her for lunch at a diner near the precinct, and they sat in near silence, both women too tense to make conversation. Catherine Morrison arrived exactly on time, escorted to the conference room by Detective Cole. She was a woman in her early 60s, with graying blonde hair and eyes that carried the weight of old sorrows. She accepted coffee but didn't drink it, her hands wrapped around the cup as if seeking warmth in the overheated room. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Morrison," Detective Cole began gently. "I know this can't be easy. I should have come forward years ago," Catherine said, her voice tight. "When those girls disappeared, when I saw the news coverage, I knew Marcus was involved. But I was too afraid to say anything, too afraid of what it would mean for me and my children." Rachel leaned forward. "You have children with him?" Catherine shook her head. "No, thank God. We never had children together. But I had 2 daughters from my first marriage, and Marcus—" She stopped, collecting herself. "Marcus paid a lot of attention to them when they were teenagers. Too much attention. It was one of the reasons I divorced him." The implication hung in the air, dark and disturbing. Detective Cole made notes, his expression carefully neutral. "Can you tell us about Marcus? What he was like? What you knew about his activities?" "We met in 1990, Catherine began, her voice distant as she reached back into memory. "I was working as a receptionist at a photography studio in Los Angeles. Marcus came in to rent studio time, and he was charming, sophisticated, successful. We dated for 6 months before getting married. I thought I had found someone special." She took a breath, her hands tightening around the coffee cup. "But Marcus had secrets. He would disappear for days at a time, claiming he was on photo shoots or scouting locations. He had the ranch property in Nevada that he said was for work, but he never let me visit it. Said it was too remote, too uncomfortable. When I pushed to see it, he'd get angry, sometimes violent." "He was physically abusive?" Detective Cole asked. "Not often, but when he was, it was terrifying. He had complete control of himself most of the time, but there would be these moments when the mask would slip and I'd see something cold underneath, something that enjoyed causing pain." Catherine's voice wavered. "I started going through his things when he was away. I found photographs hidden in his office, pictures of young women that weren't part of any normal portfolio. The women looked afraid in some of the shots, like they were being held against their will." Rachel felt her chest tighten. "What did you do?" "I confronted him. It was the stupidest thing I could have done, but I was frightened and angry, and I wanted answers. Marcus admitted that some of his photo shoots got intense, that he liked to push his models to show real emotion. He said fear created authentic expressions, that it made the photographs more powerful." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know what to do. I had no proof he had done anything illegal, just these photographs that could have been staged, but I knew I had to get away from him." "The divorce was in 1996, Detective Cole said, checking his notes. "Yes, it took me a year to work up the courage to leave, and another 6 months for the divorce to finalize. Marcus didn't fight it, didn't contest anything. He just let me go, which scared me more than if he'd fought back. It was like I had stopped being interesting to him." Catherine wiped at her eyes. After the divorce, I tried to forget about him, to move on with my life. But then in late 1997, I saw news reports about 3 young women who had disappeared from Las Vegas. They showed photographs of the victims, and I recognized the look in their eyes. It was the same look I'd seen in Marcus's hidden photographs. "Why didn't you come forward then?" Rachel asked, trying to keep the accusation from her voice. "Because I was terrified," Catherine said simply. "Marcus knew where I lived, knew my daughter's school schedules, knew everything about my life. I was afraid that if I went to the police, if I told them what I suspected, he would come after us. So I kept quiet, and I've lived with that guilt every day since." Detective Cole leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Morrison, do you have any idea where Marcus might be now? Any friends or family he might have contacted? Any place he might have gone?" Catherine hesitated, then nodded slowly. "There's his brother, Daniel Lang. They weren't close when I knew Marcus, but Daniel was the only family Marcus had left. Their parents died when they were young, and it was always just the 2 of them. Daniel lived in Arizona the last I heard, somewhere near Tucson. If Marcus is alive, if he needed help disappearing, Daniel would be the one he'd turn to." Detective Cole made a note. "Do you have contact information for Daniel?" "No, I'm sorry. We never stayed in touch. But he owned an auto repair shop in Tucson back in the 90s. It was called Lang Brothers Auto. I don't know if it's still operating." "That's very helpful," Detective Cole assured her. He paused, then asked carefully, "Mrs. Morrison, in your time with Marcus, did he ever mention other properties besides the ranch? Storage units, rental spaces, anywhere he might have kept things?" Catherine thought for a moment. "He had a storage unit somewhere in Las Vegas. He said he kept old photography equipment there, prints and negatives from past shoots. I remember he paid for it annually, even though he rarely seemed to visit it. He was very particular about me never going there." "Do you remember the facility name or location?" "No, I'm sorry, but it would be in the financial records from our marriage. I might still have some of those papers in storage." Detective Cole nodded. "If you could locate those records and send them to us, it would be incredibly valuable." He stood, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming forward, Mrs. Morrison. I know this was difficult, but your information is going to help us find him." After Catherine left, the conference room felt heavy with the weight of what they had learned. Rachel looked at Detective Cole, seeing her own determination reflected in his expression. "We're close," she said. "Daniel Lang in Tucson, the storage unit in Las Vegas. We're finally close to finding him." "We'll send officers to Tucson immediately," Detective Cole confirmed. "And we'll start checking storage facilities in Las Vegas. If Marcus Lang is still alive, if he's still out there, we're going to find him. And we're going to make him answer for every single life he took." The auto repair shop in Tucson had closed 6 years earlier, its lot now occupied by a discount furniture store. But the detective sent by the Las Vegas task force was thorough, tracking Daniel Lang through property records and DMV databases until he located the man living in a modest ranch house on the outskirts of the city. Daniel was 68 years old, retired, and according to neighbors, kept largely to himself. When the detective appeared at his door with questions about his brother Marcus, Daniel's reaction was immediate and telling. He tried to close the door, claiming he hadn't spoken to Marcus in decades and knew nothing about his whereabouts. But the detective was persistent, and eventually Daniel agreed to talk, though his hands shook as he led the way to his living room. Rachel listened to the recorded interview 2 days later, sitting in the conference room with Detective Cole, Diana, and Robert. Daniel's voice came through the speakers, thin and anxious, a man who had been carrying a heavy secret for far too long. "Marcus came to me in January 1999, Daniel said on the recording. "He showed up at my shop late one night after I'd closed. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. He said he needed my help, that he was in trouble and had to disappear." "What kind of trouble?" the detective's voice asked. He didn't say exactly, and I didn't ask. Marcus and we weren't close. Our relationship was complicated. He was older by 5 years, and after our parents died, he was the one who took care of me, But he was also cruel sometimes, controlling. I was afraid of him, if I'm being honest. There was a long pause on the recording, the sound of Daniel taking a shaky breath. He said he needed money and a new identity. He had cash with him, a lot of it, and he wanted me to help him establish a new life somewhere else. He said if I didn't help him, if I went to the police, he would make sure I suffered. And I believed him. Marcus always kept his promises, especially the threatening ones. "Did you help him?" the detective asked. "Yes." Daniel's voice was barely audible. "God forgive me, yes. I gave him money, about $15,000 I had saved, and I introduced him to someone I knew, a man who dealt in false documents. Marcus paid him to create a new identity, complete with driver's license, social security card, the works. I don't know what name he chose. The man I connected him with, he died of a heart attack 5 years ago, and his records died with him. Do you know where your brother went after that?" "No. Marcus left Tucson and I never saw him again. I didn't want to know where he went. I just wanted him out of my life." Another pause. "But about 6 months after he left, I got a postcard. No return address, postmarked from Seattle. It just said, 'Thank you for your help, little brother. I found peace.' That was the last I heard from him." Detective Cole stopped the recording. "Seattle. It's not much, but it's something." "A quarter century ago," Robert said, his voice heavy with frustration. "He could have stayed in Seattle for a week or a year, then moved on anywhere. We're looking for a ghost." "Maybe not," Detective Cole said, pulling up a new document on his laptop. "While the Tucson detective was interviewing Daniel Lang, our team here was checking storage facilities in Las Vegas. We found it. A unit rented in Marcus Lang's name from 1985 to 1999, paid annually by check. The facility is still in operation, and the current owner was able to access old records. When Lang's rental lapsed in 1999, the contents were auctioned off per their standard procedure." Rachel felt a flicker of hope. Were there records of what was in the unit? Better, the man who bought the contents, at auction still has most of it. He's a collector of vintage photography equipment, and apparently the unit was full of cameras, lenses, lighting equipment. He's agreed to let us examine everything he purchased. The collector, a man named Howard Chen, lived in Henderson, just outside Las Vegas. He met them at his home the following morning, a sprawling house with a garage converted into a photography museum of sorts, filled with carefully preserved equipment from decades past. "I remember that auction," Howard said as he led them through rows of shelves and display cases. 1999, late summer. The storage facility was clearing out units with lapsed payments. When I saw it was photography equipment, I bought the whole lot sight unseen. Cost me $1,200, which was steep, but I figured there'd be some gems in there. He gestured to a section of the garage where older equipment was stored. Most of it was standard commercial photography gear from the 80s and 90s. Good quality, well maintained. But there were also personal items mixed in. Files, documents, photographs. I kept the equipment and stored the paper materials in boxes. Never looked through them very carefully, to be honest. I was more interested in the cameras. Detective Cole had brought 2 evidence technicians with him, and they began carefully removing boxes from the shelves where Howard indicated. Each box was labeled with dates and contents in Howard's neat handwriting. Personal files, 1985 through 1990. Business records, 1991-1995. Photographs and negatives. They transported the boxes back to the precinct and spent the rest of the day cataloging the contents. What emerged was a detailed picture of Marcus Lang's life and crimes, preserved in the paper trail he had been forced to abandon when he fled. There were appointment books going back to 1983, documenting photo shoots with dates and client names. There were contact sheets showing proof prints from various sessions, beautiful young women posing against desert backdrops, urban settings, studio lights. And there were the other photographs, the ones that made Rachel's stomach turn. Women who looked frightened, uncomfortable, their smiles forced and their eyes desperate. He was escalating, Detective Cole said, studying the chronology of the photographs. In the early years, the sessions look relatively normal, but starting around 1988, you can see the change. The women look more afraid, more coerced. And then there are gaps in the appointment books, days marked with just a single letter. V. V for victim, Diana said quietly, looking over his shoulder. That's our theory. Each V corresponds with a missing persons case from the appropriate time frame. He was keeping records of his kills, disguising them as ordinary appointment book entries. Among the business records, they found financial ledgers documenting income and expenses. The ranch property appeared regularly, with substantial payments for improvements, maintenance, and property taxes. But there were also payments to other individuals, amounts that seemed odd for a photography business. $500 to J. Martinez, $300 to R. Thompson. Irregular payments over the years that didn't match any clear business purpose. Bribes, maybe, one of the evidence technicians suggested. Or payments to people who helped him dispose of evidence, cover his tracks. But it was in the last box, the one labeled photographs and negatives, that they found what Rachel had been both hoping for and dreading. An envelope marked personal, containing photographs that were clearly not from professional shoots. These were snapshots, casual pictures taken at the ranch property, showing Marcus Lang at various ages standing beside his cabin, his truck, his desert burial ground. In several photos, he wasn't alone. There was another man with him, younger, with similar features. Someone who appeared in pictures spanning from the late 1980s through the mid-1990s. That's his brother, Rachel said, recognizing Daniel Lang from photographs she had seen during the investigation. Daniel was there. He knew about the ranch. Detective Cole's expression darkened. Daniel lied to us. He said he was never at the ranch, that Marcus never let him visit. But here he is, multiple times over multiple years. He knew what his brother was doing. He immediately called the detective in Tucson. Bring Daniel Lang in for further questioning. He's been lying about his involvement. While they waited for the follow-up interview, the team continued processing the storage unit contents. They found more appointment books, more photographs, more evidence of Marcus Lang's double life. And then, at the bottom of the last box, they found a letter. It was addressed to Daniel, written in Marcus's neat handwriting, dated December 1998. The letter had never been mailed, presumably left behind when Marcus abandoned the storage unit. Detective Cole read it aloud, his voice steady despite the disturbing content. Daniel, if you're reading this, it means something has gone wrong and I've had to leave quickly. I want you to know that everything I did with clear purpose. The women I chose were lost souls, searching for meaning in shallow dreams. I gave them purpose. I gave them immortality through my art. The ranch holds my greatest work, 23 perfect moments captured in earth and memory. If I cannot return to tend my garden, promise me you'll protect it. Let no one disturb what I've created. Your brother, Marcus. The room fell silent. Rachel felt sick, hearing her sister's death described as art, as a perfect moment. Marcus Lang wasn't just a killer. He was a narcissist who believed his murders were creative acts, women's lives nothing more than raw material for his twisted vision. 23 victims, Detective Cole said grimly. 13 more than we found. We need to expand the search of the property. The follow-up interview with Daniel Lang came through that evening. Confronted with the photographs and the letter, Daniel finally broke, admitting what he had helped his brother hide for decades. I visited the ranch a few times in the early 90s, Daniel said, his voice hollow on the recording. Marcus invited me out, said he wanted to reconnect, to show me his work. I thought he meant his photography, but when I got there, when I saw what he had really created, I knew I should have run, should have gone straight to the police. What did you see? The detective asked. The graves. He showed me the graves. He was proud of them, proud of what he'd done. He called them his collection, said each one represented a moment of perfect fear, perfect submission. He said the women had been beautiful in their terror, And he had preserved that beauty forever. Daniel's voice cracked. He told me if I ever told anyone, he would add me to his collection. I believed him. So I kept his secret, and I've lived with that guilt ever since. Did he tell you about the women? Who they were? Where he found them? Some. He said most of them came through his photography business. Models looking for breaks, actresses hoping for headshots. He would befriend them, gain their trust, then invite them to the ranch for an outdoor shoot. Once he had them isolated, he would overpower them. He kept them alive for a while, hours sometimes, taking photographs of their fear before he finally killed them. He said the anticipation was the most important part, watching them realize what was going to happen. Rachel had to leave the conference room at that point, unable to listen to any more. Diana followed her into the hallway, and they stood together in silence, both women trying to process the enormity of what Marcus Lang had done to their loved ones. When Rachel returned to the conference room, Detective Cole was ending the recording. Daniel gave us more details about the ranch layout. He says there's a section of the property about half a mile from the main cabin site where Marcus mentioned having additional graves. Ground-penetrating radar teams are heading out there tomorrow. And Marcus? Rachel asked. Does Daniel know where he is now? Daniel claims he doesn't. Says the postcard from Seattle was the last contact. But Daniel has agreed to a polygraph test, and we're going through his financial records to see if there have been any suspicious transactions that might indicate ongoing contact with his brother. Robert Hastings spoke up from his seat at the table. Even if we find Marcus, even if we bring him to justice, it won't bring them back. 26 years we've lost. 26 years those women have been in the ground. No, Detective Cole agreed. It won't bring them back. But it will give them justice, and it will make sure Marcus Lang never hurts anyone else. Rachel looked at the photograph of Marcus Lang they had pinned to the evidence board, his face, staring back at her with that calculating expression. Somewhere out there, under whatever name he was using now, Marcus Lang was living a life he didn't deserve, but that life was about to end. They were too close now, had too much evidence, knew too much about his methods and his history. We're going to find him, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. And when we do, he's going to answer for every single life he took. The ground-penetrating radar teams found 8 more graves at the secondary site Daniel Lang had described. The desert had kept the remains preserved, each burial as methodical and organized as the first 10. Marcus Lang's final count was 18 confirmed victims, though the tally marks in the basement and his letter suggested there were still 5 more somewhere, perhaps on property he had accessed but not owned. Secrets the desert would keep forever. 3 months after the initial discovery, the break they needed finally came. A woman in Portland, Oregon, contacted the tip line after seeing news coverage about Marcus Lang. She had been dating a man named Michael Lawrence for the past 2 years. A quiet photographer in his late 60s who did freelance work for local businesses. He kept to himself, rarely spoke about his past, and had no social media presence. Something about his face in the news reports had struck her as familiar, though he looked older now. His hair completely white, his face lined with age. The Portland police moved quickly. Michael Lawrence was arrested at his apartment without incident, his expression showing no surprise when officers identified him as Marcus Lang. In his apartment, they found more photographs, more journals documenting years of memories about his victims. He had been unable to stop himself from preserving his legacy, even in hiding. The trial lasted 4 months. Marcus Lang pleaded not guilty, claiming the photographs and journals were fiction, creative writing exercises, and artistic explorations. But the evidence was overwhelming. DNA from the burial sites, the journal from the Lockbox, testimony from Daniel Lang, who accepted a plea deal in exchange for his cooperation, and the testimony from Catherine Morrison about Marcus's behavior during their marriage. Rachel attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row with Diana and Robert. She watched Marcus Lang, this man who had stolen her sister's life, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction when the jury returned guilty verdicts on 18 counts of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to 18 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. Marcus Lang, now 71 years old, would spend whatever remained of his life in prison. His legacy, not the artistic vision he imagined, but the memory of the lives he destroyed. After the sentencing, Rachel stood outside the courthouse with her sister's photograph clutched in her hand. The December air was cold, another Christmas approaching, 27 years after the one that had changed everything. But this Christmas would be different. This Christmas, Jennifer could finally rest. "Is it enough?" Diana asked beside her, her own hands holding a photograph of Lily. "Does it feel like justice?" Rachel considered the question. Marcus Lang would die in prison. That was certain. But the years he had stolen, the futures he had erased, those could never be returned. Jennifer would never be 24, would never fall in love, would never have children, would never grow old. All those possibilities had died in the desert 26 years ago. "It's not enough," Rachel said quietly. "It will never be enough, but it's what we have. And it means no one else will be hurt by him. That has to matter." They stood together in silence, three people bound by loss and the long pursuit of truth. Around them, the city continued its rhythm, oblivious to the small measure of justice that had been served. But for Rachel, for Diana, for Robert, and for the families of 15 other young women whose names had finally been restored to their remains, this moment marked an ending. The search was over. The questions were answered. The dead could be properly mourned. Jennifer Morrow, Lily Chen, Kimberly Hastings, and 15 other women were finally going home. No longer lost in the desert, no longer forgotten. Their killer would die in prison, his dreams of artistic immortality reduced to case files and evidence photos in a storage room. The only legacy Marcus Lang would leave was one of horror, a cautionary tale about the monsters who hide behind charming smiles and professional credentials. As Rachel walked away from the courthouse, she thought about her sister's last Christmas, how Jennifer had called her breathless with excitement about opportunities and dreams. That girl deserved to be remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived, for her ambition and her kindness, her laughter and her hope. The desert had kept its secrets for 26 years, but in the end, the earth had given up its dead, and with them, the truth. Justice had been slow, painful, and incomplete. But it had come, and in a small chapel in Phoenix, 3 weeks later, Rachel finally laid her sister to rest, the funeral she had waited more than half a lifetime to hold. Jennifer's gravestone bore her name, her dates, and a simple inscription: "Beloved daughter and sister, lost but never forgotten, found at last." The Vegas vanishing was solved. The models who disappeared on Christmas Day 1997 were home, and somewhere in the vast desert outside Las Vegas, the wind continued to blow across the burial site, but the secrets it once guarded were secrets no more.